Hi everybody. So as promised, I'm going to be discussing ADHD and me. A few technical issues on my end this evening, so I'm going to have to do some tweaking, but that's okay. Things happen. Obviously, as some of you know, I've done a kind of pre-podcast video. And during this, I kind of highlighted how my journey is a little bit different. So I'm going to start off with painting a picture. Imagine a young girl who is full of dreams, has a tendency to daydream a little bit, loves fantasy, loves singing, loves music, often feels like her life's a musical. That there's an appropriate song for an appropriate moment. And imagine that young person, that young girl, knowing that no matter how she was in school, she would always stand out. And it didn't matter how she tried to fit in, people knew she was different. She didn't really understand how, but she just knew that they knew she wasn't like them. And as most people would know, a child with ADHD hears more negative and critical words than most children. And I was no different. I was the child that got bullied in school and couldn't seem to keep friends and, was kind and polite and kept quiet, I suppose. And I think I had plenty to say, but I knew when I did speak up, people didn't like it, so I stayed quiet. And there were moments when, as I grew up, I thought if I could pretend to be more like someone else, that people would like me more. In particular, one of my siblings, people seemed to just gravitate and love her. Even my friends would stop being friends with me to be friends with my sibling. And I just thought, I don't get it. Like, what is wrong with me? And so, I am sort of outgoing, but mostly I'm an introvert. But that's when I thought, I'll be more extroverted and then people will like me more. And when I tried that, people said, stop being so over the top. So who can you be when you don't know why you're different and how you're different and why people don't understand you? So I went through a lot of that as a child. And, it didn't matter where we went, where we moved, it was still a struggle. And then when I was in university, one of the lecturers read something that I had written for an assignment and he didn't understand what I was talking about. And I tried to explain it to him, like it was one of those things where I knew exactly what I wanted to say. And I felt like I had discovered something unique about this particular assignment. I could see a different angle from what our argument was and how it could be portrayed. And I thought I'd explained it quite well. So when he said to me, this makes no sense, I was thinking, yes, it does, and even after trying to explain it, he still didn't understand what I was trying to say. So then he referred me to be assessed. And he wasn't even sure really, I don't think, what he was referring me for. He just knew that there was something different and that I potentially had a learning need. So I went to this assessment and the psychologist asked me a few questions. And I remember telling him things that at the time I didn't realise were ADHD. But it turns out, yes, that's exactly what it was. Like one example would be if I was asked to be very careful. So don't drop it. Don't, say I'm picking up something like a pan with pasta in it or, and I'm given the instruction, now do not drop it, be careful. It was like I had to, my brain, I was screaming inside my brain, do not drop it. Come on now, do not. Because I know I'm pretty clumsy. And for some reason, no matter how hard I would say to my brain, don't do that, focus, the very thing my brain would be telling me not to do, I would end up doing, which you can imagine is quite frustrating. So I explained this to the psychologist. That was one of the key things I remember saying. And at the end of the assessment, he said, right, well, I know what's going on. You've got ADHD. And he handed me a piece of paper and he said, you know, that's what it is. That's what's going on. And it was like, oh, okay. Now, I've been through a few assessments. I've been through 2 assessments for my children. My husband has recently gone up for an autism assessment, so we should have the results of that soon. And the one key thing that I've noted now is if you go for an assessment, there's much more compassion and support and guidance as to what to do next. So it's very much, have you heard much about X, Y, and Z? So, you know, have you heard much about ADHD? Do you know of any websites? Here's a list of websites and books you can look at. Or, you know, explaining to the person what that means. What does it mean that I have ADHD? Because at the time, it was like, okay, I don't get how. Like, you're saying I have ADHD, but I don't understand. And it was just very much, you can find information out there off your trot kind of thing. And it just felt very, here you go. You know what I mean? Like somebody's thrown you a ball and you're catching it. But there's no reason for throwing the ball. It's just thrown at you and you're expected to catch it and accept it. It's like that. And then I contacted my family and I let my family know that I had ADHD, and the understandable response at the time was, that's a load of rubbish, because years ago, you're talking, I got diagnosed in 2010, okay? Years ago, it was very much believed that ADHD meant you're like constantly on the move, that you're this hyperactive boy running around the classroom and all this stuff, and that's the only way you can be ADHD. And so because it was so easy for, well, first of all, for the psychologist to be dismissive, and it was so easy for my family to kind of go, no, that can't be right. Then I thought, well, maybe he's wrong. Like, you know, maybe he got it wrong because, you know, he didn't explain it and my family don't seem to think it. And so maybe it's not right. Maybe it's a load of rubbish. So then I didn't accept it. And I think the key message that I want to share through this podcast is acceptance is key to move forward. I mean, self-acceptance is so important. And for years, I never really fully accepted myself. Even down to a teenager, you know, now I've learned so much about RSD and emotional dysregulation. I think about all of those feelings that were surging inside me, and the feelings of self-loathing and not understanding why I couldn't just do what everyone else did. And it's like, that's why no matter how many people say to me, I don't want to label, I don't want to label my children, I don't want to label. It's like, I understand that, but how empowering is it when not only do you get a diagnosis, you understand what it means for you. And it's like, you know, now that I get it, I'm able to realize where actually I've kind of done things to support myself. So strategies that I didn't realize were strategies to help me cope with tasks is the key one. Actually, I was doing because on a subconscious level, I knew I needed to do it. Otherwise, things would go wrong. And if you imagine people talk about ADHD and you hear about people losing things. You hear about disorganization. You hear about forgetfulness, you know, and hyperactive mind and inability to sleep. And when I look at my life and when I look at my work ethic and how I present myself to the world, it's like a cracked mirror, because on the front face, you know, what everyone sees is a perfectionist. But why do they see that? Why do they see somebody who gives more than 100% in every area? Because the mirror was cracked. Because in the past, what was good enough for school, for people around me, for people who saw me on the peripheral, was never actually good enough. There was always something I could do better. There was always something I could improve. But it's exhausting trying to not fall short of expectations, to exceed expectations on every level, in every way, is so tiring. But I do it. Why do I do it? I want to be accepted. You know, for years of being through a rough bullying in school and having, you know, no matter where I went, people not accepting me and seeming to know that I was different and therefore not accepted. Years of that, it takes a toll. And now I realize why I throw so much energy into everything I do. I mean, it's great in a way, you know, and I talk about ADHD. I heard this phrase and I absolutely love it. And I always go back to it because for me, it explains it perfectly. So it's like saying you can't have Superman without a bit of Clark Kent, right? So what I show that I want to show to everybody is I'm Superwoman. Yeah, I can get everything done. I can give creative content for work. I can give creative content for my business. I can put energy and passion into what I'm creatively, you know, in tune to do. I can be compassionate. I can be full of energy and positivity and motivation. That's the Superwoman, Rachel. That is me jumping in head first, giving it 100%. But then what happens is that a bit of Clark Kent creeps up. So an example is a messy desk. I can be completely blind to the mess around me. There's all these papers and clutter and bits and pieces. But a lot of people say this, out of sight, out of mind. For me, out of sight, out of mind. So if you want me to remember and get all of the stuff done and get it done in a really time efficient way and to hyper focus on what you need, yeah, my desk is going to be messy because if it's not in my eye line, I'm likely to end up forgetting about it. And that is very hard. Or people find random items around the place because, and they know it's me. They know I've been there because I'll have been pacing back and forth, up and down, moving from room to room, and maybe taking a cup around with me and putting it down because I've realised something else and going to get something else and then forgetting that the cup is there and all this stuff. And people are like, Rachel's been here. Yeah. So yes, sometimes ADHD feels like a superpower because when I'm invested in something, when I'm passionate, when I'm creative, you will get the absolute best from me. You'll get nothing less because I strive for perfection. And yeah, part of that is because of my past, but part of that is because I believe I'm capable of much more. I never want to limit myself. And that can be difficult because as far as I'm concerned, there are no limitations. Imagination leads to creation, and the only limits you set are the ones you set yourself. So I always strive for more. I always think, somebody says it can't be done. Why can't it be done? How can we make it happen? What could we move around and change to make this a reality? Because actually, Who's putting that constraint in place? So that is a firm belief of mine. And it is true. I firmly believe that anything can be done just within reason. I'm starting to learn within reason.